Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at a really interesting mini PC from a company known as GEEKOM. We've actually taken a look at a lot of their mini PCs over here on the channel, but we haven't seen anything with this much power. Now usually we're working with, let's say, a Ryzen APU with integrated graphics, but with their Mini Fun 11, this will support a full-size desktop GPU. In fact, you can fit a 3-slot GPU in this mini PC. Now, I've been trying to get my hands on one of these for a little while, and by the way, this is actually using a desktop i9 variant, so I think we're going to see some really great performance here. But a lot of that performance is really going to come down to what GPU we opt to use in here, and I've got a few choices. But before we move any further, I do want to mention that this video is brought to you by Urcdkeys. I've actually been using this site for a couple years now. They do offer Steam keys, Origin, Uplay. They even offer Microsoft applications like Office, but the main reason that I use Urcdkeys is for their Windows keys. Right now, their Windows 10 Pro OEM key is $19.84, but if you use code ETA at checkout, you can get 25% off. And another great thing about buying from here is they do accept PayPal. I just did this build here. I need to activate Windows. I'm going to head over to my updates and security. We're going to go to activation. As you can see, I've got Windows 10 Pro, but it's not activated. So I'm going to change product key. I'm going to paste it in here, choose next, choose activate, and Windows is now activated. We're ready to go. My warning is totally gone, and basically that's it. They'll email your code once your payment is processed, and that's basically it. If you're interested in picking up cheap Windows 10 keys for your new PC builds, I'll leave a link in the description. Okay, so this mini PC is a bit different from others that we've taken a look at. The case here, I personally think looks really good. We've got a removable top, both the side panels will come off, and this one over here is tempered glass, so once we install a GPU, we can see everything inside of here. But taking a closer look inside of the unit itself, you can see it does look like it might be set up a bit different than others that we've seen, and that's because this is actually using an Intel NUC Extreme element. We've actually got an i9 11900KB, and as you can see, the element kind of sits in here like a GPU would. Everything is housed inside of the element, the CPU, the RAM, and the storage. When this was initially introduced by Intel, I thought it was a really awesome idea. Basically, modular PC. We could pull this out, replace it with the newer gen if we wanted to. But unfortunately, since then, the Intel NUC division has shut down, and we've already got the i9 here, so we're basically maxing this thing out with that 11900KB. Here's a quick look at the element itself, and the side panel does pop off. As you can see here, we've got our storage, our RAM, and our CPU right underneath that cooler. This will support 3 NVMe SSDs inside of the element. We've also got dual channel DDR4 RAM. I've got 32 gigs here running at 3200 megahertz. And the side panel actually acts as the NVMe cooler. As you can see, we've got some thermal pads here to help disperse that heat. The Mini Fun 11 only came with a 500 watt SFX power supply. Now this could definitely be upgraded, but I'm going to be utilizing what came in it. And the GPU I'm going to be using here does pull a little more power than I wanted, but you got to keep in mind that with this really small form factor here, this i9 11900KB isn't going to be running at full boat like it would in a full-size desktop. It's actually got a base of 65 watt and a boost up to 109 to keep it cool because this NUC Extreme element doesn't have a massive cooler. So I believe I've got enough wattage here with that 500 watt SFX to install a Radeon RX 7800 XT. With a maximum boost of 109 on the CPU and a maximum power consumption of 265 on the 7800 XT, we shouldn't overdo 500 watts here, but keep in mind, while I do my testing on these mini PCs, I always like having them plugged into a kilowatt meter so we can get total power consumption. By the end of the video, we'll be able to see what this thing really pulls. And now I will tell you, if we crank the TDP up on this i9, it can go up to 200 and something watts. We're just not going to have enough with it paired up with that 7800 XT, but the way it's set up in the NUC Extreme element is perfectly fine for this little application. The GPU I opted to use is the Gigabyte RX 7800 XT gaming overclock. We need 2 8-pin connectors, and luckily this little 500 watt SFX actually had 3. We don't need any special connectors here. We've also got 16 gigabytes of VRAM, if we can make it fit, and yeah, I do think we're going to be able to. This does support a 3-slot card. This is only a dual slot card, even though it's pretty big. And yeah, I was actually able to make everything fit here. This does have a few pre-installed RGB fans up top to kind of get all that heat out of the case itself. But when it comes to the overall specs here, For the CPU, we've got the Intel Core i9 11900KB. 8 cores, 16 threads. We've got a base clock of 3.3 GHz and a boost up to 4.9. 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM running at 3200 MHz in dual channel. We've also got that Radeon RX 7800 XT. It's the gaming overclock version, so we do have a little bit of a higher clock there right out of the box. And it's got 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM. This little PC will support 3 M.2 drives. We can go with one M.2 that can be a 2280 size, Gen 4, or 2 M.2s down to a 2242, but it also supports those 2280s, and that's going to be PCIe Gen 3. We've also got Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and we're going to be running Windows 11. I'm super excited to see how this thing performs paired up with that 7800 XT, so we're going to jump right into a little bit of gaming here. And the first one on the list is Forza Motorsports. I'm a huge fan of Forza. I've played all the games, I've bought all the games, but this one here wasn't that impressive, really due to the lackluster performance when it was initially released. And they still have a lot of work to do, because with this little setup here, we're at 1440p high. I'm not using any FSR. I've seen this fluctuate between 59 FPS up to 110. I mean, that's a giant jump. I'm going to chalk a lot of this bad performance that we're seeing in some of the areas here up to drivers and game optimizations. I know we've got more than enough power to play this game. They just really need to get the ball rolling on optimizations with this one. Now I want to take a look at a few benchmarks, and remember, we're working with an 11th gen i9. Intel has released 14th gen, so we are working with an older CPU, but it's not all that bad, especially in single-core performance. Geekbench 6, single-core, 2,326, multi, 10,024. And I know we could squeeze more out of it, upping that TDP, but we just don't have the thermal headroom with this NUC element. Moving over to some GPU benchmarks with 3D Mark. Here's Firestrike, and with this, we got a total score of 32,467. I mean, this is outstanding. And the final one I ran here was Time Spy with a very impressive 17,249. So for synthetics, not bad. I mean, these are looking like some really good scores, aside from that multi with Geekbench 6. And now it's time to move over to some more real-world gaming. Spider-Man Remastered 1440p, very high settings, no FSR. We averaged 102 FPS with this game. I mean, this is definitely more than playable, but I don't think this 7800 XT is really going to do well at 4K. Now, of course, there are some games that'll do 4K pretty decently, but not with Spider-Man and a lot of the newer AAA stuff. I consider this an Ultra 1440p card. Doom Eternal, 1440p, maxed out, Ultra Nightmare, no resolution scale. I mean, we got an average of 142 FPS. If this isn't playable enough for you, I really don't know what is, and it looks absolutely amazing at 1440p. I also ran the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark, 1440p, very high, and yeah, it's definitely going to play this game at 1440p maxed out here. Wish there was an Ultra preset with it, and with this, again, no resolution scale. We had an average of 155 FPS. I think that this is a game we could do at 4K with this card here. Had to throw in one of my other favorite racing games, Forza Horizon 5. This is one that's been on the market for a while. Optimizations are definitely out of the way with this. It works great on most systems that I've tested it with. 1440p, extreme settings, so we do have ray tracing on right now. We had an average of 160 FPS with this. Here's Cyberpunk 2077, and going into this, I actually thought we'd be able to do 1440p Ultra with it with no FSR. Unfortunately, you will have to introduce some. At 1440p Ultra, FSR, balanced, really good performance, but right now we're at 1440p high with no resolution scale, and we got an average of 76 FPS. I really thought we'd get more out of it. And finally, Starfield 1440p high, 70% resolution scale. Still really killing all these GPUs with this game, especially in the city. Out in the open or indoors, you can get 80 to 100 FPS, but I always like testing in the cities because this does take a toll on basically every system I've ever tested it on. We got an average of 64 FPS. So yeah, looking at everything I tested, getting some awesome performance here, but the one thing I was really worried about was just total system power consumption, given that we're only working with a 500 watt PSU here. But luckily, we didn't go over that 500 watt threshold, even though we're using that 7800 XT. While I do my testing on these PCs, I always have it plugged into a kilowatt meter just to get total power consumption from the wall. And at idle, this does pull 42 watts. I expected it to be kind of high there at idle. Average gaming, 333 watts. And the maximum that I could get this to pull in my extreme test was 456 watts. So we are getting close, and I do think that, if we up the TDP on the CPU, we could definitely overdo it, but the way it's set up out of the box, it works great, and we're not over 500 watts at all. Overall, really like the form factor. I'm kind of digging the look here. Now this case is by Cougar, and I do remember vaguely them putting this out specifically for that Nook Extreme element. So yeah, I guess GEEKOM got a hold of some of these, kind of rebranded them. Not too bad. I mean, it looks great. It's definitely got a higher price given that it's not coming with a GPU, but if you're looking for a really powerful small form factor unit that you can kind of tweak and tune, this might be for you. So if you're interested in learning a little more, I'll leave some links in the description, and one of the big reasons I actually went with AMD instead of NVIDIA is so we could actually turn this into a nice Steam machine. So I will have another video coming up. Definitely stay tuned to the channel. It'd be really cool if you could hit that like button or think about subscribing so you know when I post the next one. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you want to see anything else running on the Mini Fun 11, just let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.